When I discovered his unfaithfulness, it felt as though my entire world shattered. The man I had built a life with, the father of our child, had betrayed me in the most hurtful way possible. I had given him everything: my trust, my loyalty, and years of my life. When I confronted him, he didn't even attempt to deny it. His expression was a mix of guilt and annoyance, as if my heartbreak was merely a nuisance in his life. After that, divorce became unavoidable. The process was painful and filled with bitterness, but there was no reason to prolong something that was already over. Our home, once vibrant with life, now felt cold and desolate. He gathered his belongings and left, moving in with the woman he had cheated on me with. Most nights, I could still hear the echoes of our past arguments, the tense silence that filled the air when we tried to pretend everything was fine. The only bright spot through it all was my son, Alex. At 17, he wasn't a child anymore, but he wasn't quite an adult either. I could see how much he was struggling to stay strong for me, how he offered comforting hugs when the tears started to fall. It wasn't just the pain of the divorce that haunted me. It was the guilt of dragging him into this mess. I saw how it affected him, how he looked at me with concern and helplessness, as if he didn't know how to fix things. Despite everything, he chose to stay by my side. My ex-husband took the easy way out, leaving without a second thought. But Alex, he became my rock, the one constant source of support, the only person who seemed to care about the shattered pieces of my heart. The first few weeks after the divorce were a blur of sadness and exhaustion. I couldn't eat, barely slept, and every morning felt like waking up to the same nightmare. Alex would make me breakfast, forcing me to eat even when I had no appetite. He'd sit next to me on the couch, holding my hand as if that simple act could prevent me from falling apart. And maybe it did, because his presence was the only thing that kept me from breaking. One evening, as we sat watching TV together, a sense of calm washed over me that I hadn't felt in months. The warmth of his hand in mine was soothing, like an anchor pulling me back to the surface. I looked at him, truly looked at him, and realized how much he had grown. He wasn't my little boy anymore. He was almost a man. And that realization filled me with a bittersweet pride. "You don't have to stay here and take care of me," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "You have your own life to live." He turned to me, his eyes filled with a tenderness that took me by surprise. "I want to stay," he said simply. "You're my mom, and I'm not going to leave you alone." The sincerity in his voice made tears well up in my eyes. I tried to hold them back, but they spilled over anyway. He wrapped his arms around me, pulling me close, and I buried my face in his chest, letting myself cry for the first time since the divorce. I cried for everything I'd lost, for the life I had imagined we would share, and for the betrayal that shattered it all. When I finally pulled away, I felt embarrassed by how vulnerable I had become. I wiped my eyes and gave him a weak smile. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I shouldn't put all of this on you." He shook his head, brushing away a stray tear from my cheek. "It's okay, Mom," he said softly. We're in this together." Something in the way he said it made my heart swell with emotion. I leaned in and kissed his forehead, just like I used to when he was little. For a moment, it felt like everything might be okay, like maybe we could rebuild something out of the wreckage of our broken family. As the weeks turned into months, we fell into a new routine. It was just the two of us now. While it was lonely, it was also peaceful. We had dinner together every night, talking about our day, and I found myself opening up to him in ways I hadn't before. He wasn't just my son anymore. He had become my confidant, the one person I could be honest with. One night, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, he turned to me with a serious look in his eyes. "Are you happy?" he asked, his voice tinged with concern. I hesitated, caught off guard by the question. "I don't know," I admitted. "I'm trying to be." He nodded, his hand finding mine. "You deserve to be happy," he said quietly. "You deserve someone who loves you." I looked at him, surprised by the intensity in his gaze. There was something different in the way he was looking at me, something I couldn't quite understand. It wasn't the look of a son comforting his mother. It was deeper, more complex. For a moment, I felt a flicker of something unfamiliar, something I knew I shouldn't feel. I quickly pulled my hand away, forcing a smile. "Thank you, sweetheart," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "You're a good son." But as I stood up to go inside, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted between us. That night, I lay awake in bed, replaying the moment over and over in my mind. "It's nothing," I told myself. "He was just being sweet, trying to make me feel better." But deep down, I knew that wasn't the full truth. There was a tension between us now, an unspoken something that neither of us knew how to handle. The next morning, I avoided his gaze as we sat for breakfast. I couldn't look at him without feeling a rush of confusing emotions, a mixture of love, fear, and something else I didn't want to acknowledge. He seemed to sense it too, the way he glanced at me, hesitant and uncertain. I knew we couldn't keep pretending that nothing had changed. I just didn't know how to face it. The awkward silence between us stretched on as we finished our meal. It wasn't the familiar quiet of two people who knew each other deeply. It was a tense silence, filled with things we couldn't say. I forced myself to focus on the simple task of clearing the table, but my hands shook as I gathered the plates. I could feel his eyes on me, watching me with an intensity that sent chills down my spine. "Mom, wait," Alex said softly, his voice pulling me back from my spiraling thoughts. I turned to face him, clutching the plates as if they were a lifeline. He stood up and crossed the room to stand too close. My breath caught in my throat. I could smell the familiar scent of his cologne mixed with the faintest hint of soap. He reached out, gently taking the plates from my hands and setting them on the counter. His fingers brushed mine, and the touch was electric, sparking something deep inside me that I didn't want to admit. I took a step back, needing space, but he followed, his gaze fixed on mine. "Mom," he whispered, his voice filled with a raw vulnerability I had never heard before. "Please don't pull away from me." "I'm not," I lied, my voice trembling. I couldn't meet his eyes, afraid of what I might see there, afraid of what he might see in mine. You are, he insisted, reaching out to lift my chin, forcing me to look at him. Ever since that night on the porch, you've been distant. It feels like you're avoiding me. I'm not avoiding you, I said, the words weak and unconvincing, even to myself. I've just been overwhelmed. It's been a lot to process. He nodded, his eyes softening with understanding. I get that, he said quietly, but you don't have to go through this alone. I'm here for you. I want to be here for you. His words felt like a balm to my wounded soul, but they also stirred a confusing mix of guilt and longing. I wanted to believe him, wanted to lean into the comfort he was offering. But the way he looked at me, there was something in his eyes I couldn't ignore. It wasn't just a son's concern for his mother. It was something deeper, something more intense. Alex, I began, but my voice broke. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. You've been incredible, and I don't know what I would have done without you these past few months. But I need you to know that there are boundaries, lines we can't cross. His expression faltered, pain flashing in his eyes, before he quickly masked it. He dropped his hand from my face and took a step back. I know, he said, his voice hoarse. I know there are lines, but sometimes it feels like those lines are just there to keep us from being honest about how we really feel. I stared at him, stunned into silence. My heart pounded in my chest, and I felt like I couldn't breathe. He was saying aloud what I had been too afraid to even think. The air between us felt thick, heavy with unspoken words and forbidden desires neither of us knew how to express. This isn't right, I whispered, more to myself than to him, wrapping my arms around myself as if I could hold myself together against the storm of emotions inside me. Maybe it isn't, Alex admitted, stepping closer again, his voice low, almost pleading. But it's real. I can't pretend anymore. And I don't think you can either. Tears welled up in my eyes, and I shook my head, taking another step back until I was pressed against the kitchen counter. You don't know what you're saying, I said, my voice thick with emotion. You're confused. This is all just because of everything that's happened. The divorce, the stress. You're looking for comfort, and I'm the only one here. He let out a shaky breath, running a hand through his hair in frustration. Mom, it's not just that. It's not confusion. I've tried to push these feelings away, tried to ignore them, but they keep coming back. And I know you feel something too. I see it in the way you look at me. My resolve crumbled under the weight of his words. The truth was, he was right. I had felt it too. The pull, the connection that went beyond maternal love. I had buried it, refusing to acknowledge it. But now that he had said it, there was no going back. I'm your mother, I whispered. This, whatever this is, it can't happen. It's wrong. He closed the distance between us in 2 quick strides, gently gripping my arms as he looked down at me. His expression was pleading. Maybe it's wrong, he said, his voice raw with emotion. But it's also the most real thing I've ever felt, and I don't want to lose you. You're not going to lose me, I insisted, though my own voice trembled with uncertainty. But this, it has to stop. We can't go down this road. His grip on my arms tightened slightly, as if afraid I might slip away. Tell me you don't feel it too, he challenged, his eyes searching mine. Look me in the eyes and tell me you don't feel the same way. I opened my mouth to deny everything, to put an end to this madness. But the lie wouldn't come. I couldn't do it. The truth was there, raw and undeniable, shimmering between us like a fragile thread, and I didn't have the strength to sever it. I can't, I admitted, my voice breaking. But that doesn't make it right. For a long moment, we just stood there, staring at each other. The silence was deafening, filled with all the things we couldn't say. Then slowly, he leaned down, his face inches from mine, giving me one last chance to pull away. I didn't. When his lips met mine, it felt like a dam breaking. All the tension, the fear, all the unspoken emotions that had been building up for months crashed over us in a wave of need and longing. I kissed him back, my hands tangling in his hair as I gave in to the moment, letting myself feel everything I had tried so hard to deny. We broke apart, both of us breathing hard, our foreheads resting together. What are we doing? I whispered, the enormity of it all crashing down on me. I don't know, he admitted, his voice barely a whisper. But I don't want to stop. Neither did I, and that terrified me more than anything. For a brief moment, everything seemed to fade away. There was only the sensation of his breath mingling with mine, the heat of his body pressing against me, and the rapid pounding of my heart echoing through my entire being. I knew I should pull away, push him back, say something to break the spell we were under, but I couldn't. I was frozen, trapped in this raw moment of vulnerability and longing that neither of us seemed able to escape. Mom, he whispered, the words sounding both familiar and strange on his lips, filled with a yearning I knew wasn't supposed to be there. It snapped me back to reality, a cold wave of clarity cutting through the haze of desire. I stepped back, putting distance between us, though every fiber of my being screamed against it. I couldn't look at him, couldn't face the expression I knew would be on his face. My hands shook as I brought them up to cover my mouth, as if I could erase what had just happened with sheer willpower. We can't do this, I choked out, my voice strained, as though it were being pulled from deep inside me. This isn't right. It's not okay. Alex's face twisted with a mix of hurt and frustration. He took a step closer, reaching out as if to comfort me, but I flinched away, the gesture cutting deeper than any words could have. Please, please don't, I whispered, wrapping my arms around myself. I need time to think. I need to process this. He stood there, looking lost and vulnerable in a way I had never seen before. It broke my heart to see him like that, but I couldn't let myself be swayed by the look in his eyes, no matter how much I wanted to. I'm sorry, he said, his voice barely audible, as though he was afraid to speak the words out loud. I didn't mean to push you. I've never felt anything like this before, And I don't know how to handle it. Neither do I admitted, my voice trembling with the weight of the truth. But we can't let this go any further. It has to stop now, before we do something we can't take back. He nodded slowly, but the pain in his eyes made it clear he wasn't convinced. He looked like a lost little boy, and it made my heart ache to see him like that. But I knew I had to be strong for both of us. "I'll give you space," he said finally, his voice thick with emotion. "But please don't shut me out completely. I can't stand the thought of losing you, even if it's just as my mom." Tears welled up in my eyes, but I blinked them away, offering him a small, broken smile. "You're not going to lose me," I promised, though I wasn't sure if it was a promise I could keep. "I just need time." With that, I turned and walked out of the kitchen, my legs feeling like they might collapse under me at any moment. I made it upstairs to my bedroom, closing the door behind me before collapsing onto the bed. The tears I had been holding back finally spilled over, and I buried my face in the pillow, sobbing quietly into the fabric. I didn't know how long I lay there, but it felt like hours. My mind was a whirlwind of confusion and guilt, the taste of his kiss still lingering on my lips, like a forbidden secret I could never confess. I hated myself for wanting it, for feeling the way I did. I was his mother, and this was a line we couldn't cross, no matter what my heart might be telling me. Eventually, the tears dried up, leaving me feeling hollow and exhausted. I rolled onto my back, staring up at the ceiling as if it might hold the answers I so desperately sought. How had it come to this? How had we let things get so out of control? I thought back to the months following the divorce, the way we had clung to each other in the aftermath, seeking comfort and solace in a world that felt cold and unforgiving. We had become everything to each other because we had no one else. It had been innocent at first, a shared need for support and love, but somewhere along the way, the lines had blurred. The closeness we shared had turned into something else, something neither of us knew how to handle. A soft knock on my bedroom door pulled me from my thoughts. I sat up quickly, wiping at my eyes, as if I could erase all evidence of my tears. "Mom, are you okay?" Alex's voice was soft, hesitant, as though he wasn't sure if he should even be speaking to me. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "I'm fine," I said, though my voice sounded far from fine. "I just need a little time alone." There was a long pause, and I could almost feel his anxiety through the closed door. "I understand," he said finally. "I'll be downstairs if you need me." "Okay," I whispered, though I knew I wouldn't be calling for him anytime soon. I listened to the sound of his footsteps retreating down the hallway, and a fresh wave of guilt washed over me. The rest of the day passed in a blur as I stayed locked in my room, trying to sort through the mess of emotions that had been unleashed. I replayed the kiss in my mind over and over, hating myself for how I had responded to him, for the way I had wanted it. I was supposed to be the adult, the one who set boundaries and protected him, but I had failed. When evening came, I finally forced myself out of bed. I couldn't avoid him forever. We lived under the same roof, and I owed it to him to at least try to talk this through. I made my way downstairs, finding him sitting on the couch with the TV on, though it was clear he wasn't watching it. He glanced up when I entered, his eyes searching mine for any sign of forgiveness or resolution. I sat down next to him, leaving a small but deliberate space between us. For a long moment, we just looked at each other, neither of us knowing what to say. "We can't pretend this didn't happen," I said finally, my voice low and shaky. "But we have to find a way to move past it. We can't let this destroy everything." He nodded, swallowing hard. "No, I don't know how to move past it. I don't know how to stop feeling the way I do." The raw honesty in his voice broke something inside me, but I forced myself to stay strong. "You have to try," I said gently, "for both of our sakes. We can't go down this road, Alex. It's too dangerous. It would ruin us." "I'll try," he said, though he didn't sound convinced. "But I don't think it's going to be that easy." Neither did I.